Give us a break. Don't try what you're about to see at home.
In this wall-shaking episode of Mythbusters,
That's the sound!
we're taking combustion and propulsion to their unnatural limits. Can a well-aimed, high-pressure air tank really be a lethal missile? Could 2 compressed air cylinders power the world's fastest speedboat?
Remember, Jamie, experiments like this are 90% mental.
And can an engine fueled by gunpowder do anything but blow itself to pieces? It's fast, it's furious,
It was the lard that did it.
and it's firing on all cylinders. Who are the Mythbusters? Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman.
This is gonna kill you.
Between them, more than 30 years of special effects experience.
That's what I'm talking about.
Joining them, Tori Belleci,
Very excited about this.
Carrie Byron,
Look, he cracked into his skull.
and Grant Imahara.
Don't say anything.
They don't just tell the myths, they put them to the test. As Adam loves to demonstrate, there's all sorts of interesting ways to injure yourself on the job. It seems danger is everywhere, but nothing on the workshop floor has quite the deadly potential of a compressed gas cylinder. Accidentally snap the valve, and any tank instantly transforms into a massive rocket with no flight plan. Now, that's a fact, but what's the myth?
Well, we touched upon it a little during Shark Week, but I don't think we finished it.
Oh, I remember that thing.
Yeah, compressed air cylinders, and there are no end to the stories that people tell about the kind of damage that they can do.
Well, this one just made a really big boom, but you're talking about where they take off like a rocket and go through a concrete wall, right?
Exactly, and that is precisely the myth that we'll be testing.
Adam and Jamie have some experience to draw on. Back in their Jaws special, they blew a scuba tank with a wad of C4 explosive. Then shot another tank with a high-powered rifle. It didn't blow up, but it sure went off. And if a cylinder rocket can bend solid steel, what's it going to do to a concrete wall?
As far as I'm concerned, there really is only one way to test this thing.
Well, yeah, we have to fire it at a cinder block wall.
So we're going to need a selection of air cylinders and some regulators on them. We're going to need a cinder block wall to fire them into, and some kind of method for catastrophically taking that regulator right off.
And also, we have to figure out how to make sure it actually hits the wall. I mean, what if this thing just kind of goes like that?
I think I want to be outside the building that we're testing this inside of.
Yep.
To test the myth, they'll need to aim the cylinder like a missile, devise some way to sever the valve in a split second, and build a wall to aim at. They'll have to start work on the wall first, so Jamie's assistants, Terry and Tyler, get commissioned as Mythbuster Masons.
So I'm going to set you up, and it's going to be in your hands to make sure it all happens. So don't screw up. I'll kick your butt.
Walls are useful for all sorts of things, like holding up the roof. So, punching a high-speed hole through a supporting wall might not be such a good idea. This freestanding barricade won't be pretty, but it will be, well, great. Meantime, Adam is checking the myth with a man whose whole working life has been spent under extreme pressure. George Ratterman supplies valves and cylinders across the USA. And like most of us, he's heard all of those explosive stories secondhand.
The first thing we've heard is that if you knock off the valve to a cylinder, they can fly right through a brick wall.
Yeah, you know, that is a myth. I've heard that from a number of people. In most cases, you ask them a few more questions, you find out they actually weren't there. I think somebody else told them. And most of the time what the story is, it would take off and it would usually go through a cinder block wall, disappear, go out in the field, or else possibly be found, you know, through a couple more fences or something.
We want to build this rig that shears the valve right off of this. And the first test rig is a large weight in a guided tube that comes down right on top of the cylinder and knocks it right off. I mean, do you think that's going to work?
I don't know if that's going to work. I would be concerned that you're going to end up with an uneven brake and or only a partial brake, and that's when you're really going to get a spinning effect of the vessel.
And remember, we're talking an ankle-smashing 140-pound steel cylinder. Even a partial shear could send this thing ballistic. It might also start spinning erratically, which Jamie calls rat chasing. To ensure that doesn't happen, the tank needs a long, sturdy guide rail to guarantee it takes off in a straight line.
I've got to build a rig that does a couple of different things. The first thing is that it has to hold this tank steady in such a place that we can drop a heavy weight on the valve and knock it off. The second thing is that same holder is going to guide it as it takes off so that once it gets going, it's aimed in a certain direction and it'll hit the wall at speed, we hope.
Good. It looks like it fits fine.
To sever the valve, he's fitting a hinged 10-foot tube to drop a 40-pound steel bar bang on the nozzle. Adams borrowed some tea-sized tanks from George, so all they need now is a good, solid target.
I think we got everything.
All right. Well, let's get out there and try and blow one of these cylinders through the wall.
This military bunker is the perfect place to test what we all hope will be the world's first and most destructive land torpedo. Seems Terry and Tyler did a first-rate job.
It works for me. I think this will do just fine.
Yeah, that seems nice and solid.
It's not quite as big as the side of a barn, but the question remains, can the cylinder actually hit it?
So I'm thinking that when we set up the rig over by the door, we want to make sure those doors are as close as we can get them.
Okay, well, they are, in theory, rockets, so we should be careful with them.
To help the rocket on its way, Myth-Jess gets to grips with the lard. Trust Jamie to always have a bucket or two on hand. It's cheap, it's smelly, and it's a great way to reduce friction.
It's important to be judicious about your lard distribution, Jess.
The rig is greased and ready, but will the steel bar have enough momentum to break the nozzle?
This is a 2 by 2 inch solid steel bar, and it weighs, I think, officially a heck of a lot.
That's 40 pounds dropped from a height of 10 feet. It's a classic case of a square peg in a round hole, and that surely deserves a test run.
Piece of a brick right there.
All right.
That'll keep the end of our piece of steel from getting too damaged.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, yeah. That looks pretty serious.
If a 40-pound bar can do this, just imagine what a 140-pound gas tank could do. If all goes to plan, it's looking curtains for our wall.
Shooting the scuba tank with a 30-06, that was awesome. And I have never felt like we were totally done with that until 10 minutes from now.
Coming up, Harry, Grant, and Tori put gasoline and gunpowder to the test in a giant homemade cylinder. And the boys get ready to bring the house down.
Searing the compressed air cylinder in 3, 2, 1.
Now, here's a motor myth that's way overdue for testing. In fact, it's a classic blast from the past. Most modern engines run on gasoline, but it wasn't always the fuel of choice. Some mechanical pioneers favored a more explosive kind of combustion.
Trying to test the claim that you can run an engine using only gunpowder.
Sounds easy enough. Get an engine, add black powder, ignite.
Hang on a minute. There have been a lot of people that have tried this through the ages. Maybe we should try a few of their experiments just to see if we can learn from their mistakes.
Finally, we get to learn from somebody else's mistakes.
Now, common sense tells us the words engine and gunpowder shouldn't even be used in the same sentence. But the respected men of science who designed our 3 test engines clearly thought otherwise. And Tori's not going to learn from anyone's mistakes, because as far as we know, not one of these engines was ever actually built. The gunpowder fuel they plan to use is often called black powder. It's a volatile mix of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. But before the team even thinks about putting this lethal compound in an engine, it's worth finding out if it really has the kick needed to push a piston.
Well, we think that there could be some really good reasons why you'd want to use black powder in an engine. To demonstrate that, we're going to do a comparison between black powder and gasoline.
For this first experiment, they custom-build a super-sized piston to test the comparative grunt of gasoline and gunpowder. To check that the seal works, they need an air pressure test. And Carrie can't resist going along for the ride. Well, the piston works. Operations move out to the car park and into the blast chamber. That's an indication of how much faith they have in the black powder.
Black powder comes with its own oxidizer, so unlike gasoline, which you need to inject a certain amount of air to get it to combust, black powder is ready to go all the time.
Finding which fuel produces more energy is easy enough to measure. A magnet sitting on top of the piston should stick to this metal scale, just where the piston hits the top of its stroke. First, the gasoline. Then a propane flame to vaporize it.
Gas ignition in 3, 2, 1.
The gasoline-powered piston has made its mark.
No, it couldn't have gone up there. So it accelerated it all the way up here.
So will the black powder measure up? Grant's quietly confident.
Our research indicates that black powder has a lot more energy density.
They wait for the flame to ignite the powder.
Ah, there we go.
Wow.
Perfect.
They don't call it gunpowder for nothing.
Wow. Shot the magnet off the scale.
So this is where the gasoline magnet got shot to. And there is where the black powder magnet got shot to.
Well, that's fairly conclusive.
Black powder does have more energy density than regular gasoline, meaning you need less of it to get the same amount of power.
So it is a sound concept.
But what happens when a sound concept meets an unsound engine? There's still 3 combustible contraptions to put to the test. high-pressure gas cylinders have been around for 100 years, and legends of their destructive potential have been around for 99. But could a ruptured tank really burrow through a brick wall? Back at the bunker, Adam and Jamie are about to find out.
All right, I'm arming the rig.
Arming the rig means unscrewing the protective cap. All that remains is to pull the string that releases the weight. That hopefully guillotines the valve.
All right, ladies and germs. Shearing the compressed air cylinder in 3, 2, 1.
This is close to a worst-case scenario. As feared, the valve was only partially sheared, so the cylinder went absolutely nowhere.
I'm going to wait however long it takes for it to let go of its air, because it's got a damaged valve, and that valve could give any minute and, become a bullet.
It's a very slow leak, so the boys have 45 minutes to stand well back and revise their plans. After the break, the world's first gunpowder engine is cocked and loaded.
Fire in the hole!
Then Jamie and Adam reset for the final countdown.
Cross your fingers. 3, 2, 1.
Cary, Grant, and Tori are out to test the myth that an engine can actually run on gunpowder. They've shown that black powder definitely has the muscle to move a piston.
This is where the gasoline magnet got shot to. And, there is where the black powder magnet got shot to.
Now to build a primitive kind of proto-engine, specifically designed to run on powder. It was dreamed up by a Dutchman named Christian Huygens more than 300 years ago. His blueprint was the very first to feature a piston in a cylinder. When the black powder ignites, expanding gases are meant to force air out of two valves, creating a vacuum that sucks the piston down.
It looks pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Whether or not it's going to work, that's going to be the hard part.
The design is simple and a lot easier to build now than it would have been in 1680. Total success means getting a near-perfect vacuum. That's a tricky thing to do with so many moving parts, especially when you have to drill a hole for the fuse.
Well, there's a hole down here. That's not going to give you a vacuum. That's what the problem is.
I mean, we'd have to have that hole there to ignite the black powder.
How are you going to get a vacuum then?
Dude, I'm just going from the designs of Huygens. Should we, raise them for the dead? Well, I finished my Huygens black powder engine. So now what we're going to do, I drilled a little hole at the bottom cap. We're going to fill this up with some gunpowder, put a remote fuse in there, light it, and see if it does, in fact, raise up our weight.
I am not sure if we're going to get a good enough vacuum, and that's the whole principle that this Huygens engine works on. But, there's only one way to find out.
Here we go in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, God, did you feel that? The vacuum, it's sucking me in. It was huge.
Yeah, it sure does suck.
But the weight did rise a little, which means the piston moved slightly in the cylinder.
Dude, it totally pulled it down. Look at this.
Well, if it were a vacuum, it would have been holding, you wouldn't have been able to pull it back.
So they upped the charge from 15 to 20 grains.
In 3, 2, 1.
It looks like Huygens' original draft is just a little bit too drafty.
We have two things working against us. Our seal between the piston and the chamber isn't completely airtight. We got it as tight as possible, but there's still some leaks, so we're not getting a true vacuum. And then also our one-way valves, they're not totally airtight either.
modern machining gave the engine a better chance of success than Huygens could have imagined. And it still didn't work. One black powder engine down, 2 to go. But there's reason to be hopeful.
Just running through this experiment, though, you can see why people were so intrigued by the whole black powder engine. It takes so little to create so much force.
And soon they'll see if that force makes or breaks an engine George Cayley had high hopes for. Adam and Jamie are trying to figure out what went wrong with their first attempt to blast an air cylinder through a brick wall.
I can still see it.
Yeah, it hasn't moved.
In best Mythbusters tradition, they decide to tinker with just about everything.
So this second time around, we've added more weight. We've lubricated the whole weight system so that it'll be more slippery when it goes down. And then probably most importantly of all, we've moved the valve placement slightly so that the weight when it hits it will hit right on the very tip of the valve. And that'll provide the most leverage and hopefully snap it more readily.
Calm, steady words from a man who's hoping to launch a gas cylinder into the next county.
Here we go, shearing the regulator off the tank. Attempt number 2. In 5, 4, cross your fingers, 3, 2, 1. Yeah! That's the sound! That is a lovely, lovely sound.
The valve has sheared clean off, and that's a very good sign. It looks like the cylinder flew straight and true, but did it have enough thrust to crack the wall?
Oh, God. It was the lard that did it.
At 40 miles per hour, the air tank turned the cinder block to cinders. It even put a fair dent in the wall 6 feet behind it.
It totally.
No way.
I mean, it didn't go all the way through, but it went through this one, and it was going. It's working its way through that one.
I was ready to see this as not possible. I was totally expecting it not to actually work because it's one of those apocryphal tales, and everyone we talked to had heard the story, but no one knew anybody that it happened to.
You know, this was an optimum situation for this tank. What this tank did is as good as it gets.
My favorite thing is just the perfect roundness of the top of this hole. It also pushed this entire wall back a ½ an inch.
Although the cylinder was deliberately aimed, you couldn't ask for a more convincing result. So let's call this myth totally and spectacularly confirmed. Next up, the gunpowder plot thickens. And Jamie finds a boat that's fit to run on rocket power.
Give us a break.
Don't try anything you're about to see us do at home.
Cary Grant and Tori are hell-bent on proving an engine can run on gunpowder.
Fire in the hole!
But could this really be a viable alternative to gasoline? They've already built, tested, and been disappointed by a black powder engine designed way back in the 17th century. So it's back to the drawing board.
You know what our problem is going to be is getting an engine to start and sustain itself using black powder.
I do remember coming across a black powder engine. I think it was Sir George Cayley, the guy who did the first glider, and he was the father of modern aerodynamics. He had wanted to make a flying machine that was completely powered by a black powder engine that reloaded itself. So, I mean, I bet we could find some plans floating around the files somewhere.
Thanks to the graphics department, we can see it would have looked something like this. When the powder ignites, the air expands into the reservoir cylinder, pushing the piston up. Then at the top of the stroke, a bowstring pushes the piston back down. On each rise, the piston turns a stop cock, which funnels more gunpowder into the system. And so the cycle is repeated. And repetition is the key to a working engine.
Maybe the gunpowder engine could be making a big comeback here.
Yeah.
We could get rid of all of our fossil fuel dependence.
Knocking up a 19th century engine poses no problems. And luckily, they even have a bow handy, a leftover from the split arrow myth. They string it over the piston, and pretty soon, Kaylee's drawing comes to life.
The clever part is that it reloads the gunpowder every single time, hopefully, so that this piston will keep going and we've created an engine. Big explosion, a lot of screaming, some fun, hopefully safe fun.
I'm feeling supremely confident, actually, in this device. I think it's at least going to give us 2 cycles. I think it's probably going to give us more, depending on how much gunpowder we put in the reservoir.
They fuel up. Or should that be load up?
Remember, you don't want to put more than you need.
Thank you, Tori.
Dose 1, going in.
That's 5 grains of black powder. Will it be enough to get this engine turning over?
Move it. All right, we're lit. Whoa!
Okay, it sort of worked. The expanding gases did push the piston up, and the bowstring did reset the piston. But the reload mechanism didn't, well, reload. Still, it's not like the whole thing's gone up in smoke.
It actually worked and it didn't fall apart. We had one good stroke, but unfortunately, our hopper seemed to have shot or knocked out all of our gunpowder, which flashed when it hit the propane.
The answer? Some aluminum foil over the hopper, which should keep the powder in place. Take 2. Remember, for proof of concept, the engine has to complete at least 2 cycles. Once again, the engine only manages a single stroke. The problem this time is Carrie's reload mechanism can't keep up.
It's happening too fast to dump the black powder in there.
It's not gonna just fall into the little groove really, really quickly if it's just a...
Basically, the action is so fast and violent, it doesn't have time to reload. That means a black mark for another black powder engine. Adam and Jamie have already proved the power of a well-aimed T-type air tank. Cylinder 1, wall, nothing. It was almost too easy.
I'm now wondering what we do to harness this kind of power.
Why don't we put a saddle on it and take a ride? What do you think?
No, a speedboat. Let's put a couple of them in a boat and see how fast we can go on the water.
That might be a little safer.
In place of a normal engine, they plan to fit 2 monster air tanks with 5,200 pounds of pent-up pressure between them. Adam has to build a throttle that releases both valves at precisely the same time. And Jamie needs to buy a boat that won't blow the budget. This one's a lean 16-footer, designed for high speed. It's also missing a motor, a dashboard, and a steering wheel.
So I assume it floats, right?
I've never had it in the water, so you're going to have to go on faith.
So there you have it, a boat that never left the driveway. At least there should be no sentimental attachment.
You've seen the show before, right?
Oh, yes, big fans.
So you're aware that there's a strong likelihood that we're going to do something horrible to your boat?
Yes, yeah.
You have any kind of, like, remorse or anything about seeing your boat, potentially turned into shrapnel?
We were sort of expecting it, that could happen to it.
Selling your boat to the Mythbusters must feel something like selling your horse to the glue factory. Still, the deal is struck, and it smiles all around.
Of course, you know that the two happiest days of a boat owner's life are the day that you buy a boat and the day that you sell it. I think this is one of those days. So.
And it's one of those days for Jamie, too. There's no feeling quite so rewarding as carefully customizing your very own speedboat.
Always brightens my mood when we get to break out the sledgehammer.
The team has just one day to get through a titanic amount of work. They've decided to mount the seat between the two tanks, and for some obscure nautical reason, they're using Adam's posterior as a yardstick.
The minimum is going to be like about 15 inches.
Wait, you're going too far. I'm going inside of my hands.
Yeah, you're squeezing in. That's 14 inches then.
Why Jamie needs an accurate measure of Adam's buttocks is anyone's guess. But it is time they both got the lead out. So, with a little elbow grease, then some screws and a strong epoxy glue for the baseboard, our dual inboard rockets are finally hauled on board and strapped down tight.
Dude, I love it. I'm starting to get excited.
And although Adam's backside set the standard, it's Jamie who'll be steering the ship.
Go ahead and have a seat.
To ensure these two cylinders fire at precisely the same time, the factory-fitted nozzles are being replaced with ball valves. They'll both be hooked up to a single linkage devised and built by our very own Adam Savage.
We'll have a lever here or here, and we will activate that lever. It'll open up the valves, releasing the pressure, and hopefully what we'll see out of this boat is what we saw out of our tank in the concrete wall experiment.
2 hours later, and that scratch-built throttle is up and running. It's simple, it's purely mechanical, and it works.
This is the business end. It's a half-inch bore, 2,600 PSI coming through each one. It was enough to drive a single 150-pound tank through a wall, and halfway through a second wall. The question is two of them enough to drive a rocket boat?
Still to come, a paddle wheel outboard that could make or break the myth of black powder engines. Our black powder dynamos have already brought two antique engines to life. Then watch them die a sad death.
So that leaves us where?
Back at square one.
Not actually. Since we've been dealing with an internal combustion engine, I was thinking, hey, let's try an external combustion engine. Let's get rid of the piston, and we'll make like a water wheel.
Tori's thinking of Thomas Paine's 19th century radial engine, which does work much like a water wheel. But what if we replaced water power with the grunt of gunpowder?
Okay, well, Tori works in the opposite direction of engineering history. How about you and I go find ourselves an internal combustion engine, something that's already a successful engine, and try to adapt it to black powder?
Well, it should work in theory. Sounds good.
While Tori starts work on his black powder wheel, Grant and Carrie will take a regular 4-stroke engine, replace gas with gunpowder, and try to rev it up. Before they do that, one or two questions need answering.
The first test that we have to perform is to see whether this spark plug can ignite the black powder.
Using a drill, Grant will run the engine manually to see if the spark plug's spark is enough to ignite 5 grains of gunpowder.
Woo! Yeah! Woo! Worked!
Okay, good.
Nice!
Good. Great.
For his Thomas Paine-designed radial engine, Tori's lined the perimeter of a wagon wheel with metal cups. The expanding gases from the powder, ignited in a separate chamber, will channel into the cups, causing the wheel to spin.
Dude, it's like an 1860s circular saw.
To keep his engine running, Tori has also rigged a hopper to reload the powder after each blast.
Right now I have the black powder dispenser rigged up to the rig here, and I have this little piece of steel. As it rotates, it will push the button in and releasing an amount of black powder.
To test the wheel, Grant blasts compressed air through the system.
That
looks pretty good, man.
Yeah. How much PSI was that?
This is 125 PSI. Black powder's going to be tens of thousands.
With those kinds of forces in play, they set up Tori's Wheel of Misfortune in the blast chamber. In the first test, they'll start slow with just 15 grains of black powder per cycle.
Initiating glow plug. Okay, and not enough pressure to get the wheel going.
And even with 70 grains,
Wow.
Payne's Wheel of Steel just ain't spinning. Before Tori slides into depression, he wants to improve the compression and try again.
So the only modification that I did is I cut off this big chamber, which is way too big. We weren't getting the compression that we need. I welded on a smaller tube. Hopefully it'll give us more compression. It's more like a shotgun, and hopefully we'll get this wheel spinning.
All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1.
This is taking too long.
Oh! Maybe that was a little too much.
No, 70 grains wasn't too much. The whole thing backfired. Gases from the explosion were forced back up into the hopper, which set off all the black powder. And still, the wheel didn't turn.
Oh, no! Wait, don't keep it going yet.
They've blown the hopper off, so this experiment is pretty much over.
Not only did it not work, now we don't have a way to continue to introduce black powder into our engine.
Adjusting the charge and the timing might have helped, but the gravity-fed reload system looks doomed to failure every time. Payne's instructions were followed precisely, so it's safe to say that like the other two engines that came before, it just doesn't work. But Grant, Carrie, and Tori have one last hope. They'll put gunpowder in a lawnmower engine to see if that cuts the mustard. Grant's mental machinery has already been crunching the gears, pondering a way of getting the black powder into the engine. And he's devised an ingenious fuel injection system.
What this is an air eraser, basically a miniature sandblaster. Black powder goes inside of this reservoir, and compressed air goes in here. You set this to wherever you want it to be, and a constant stream of black powder should be shooting out of here.
Out in the blast chamber, they set up for the test. The air eraser is rigged up to squirt the black powder directly into the combustion chamber.
Is anybody else as excited about this as I am?
Once again, Grant uses the drill to turn the engine over. Sort of a crude version of the starter motor you'd find in your car.
Fire in the hole!
A second or two later, the fuel should kick in. In this case, the powder. We're anticipating a throaty throb and a nice dark puff of exhaust gas.
Well, that didn't quite work.
And when Grant takes a peek inside the casing, he sees why.
Is it all gooped up from the oil?
Yeah, there's quite a bit that's actually kind of clumped in a wet puddle.
They're left with an engine enigma.
Our fuel needs to be dry to ignite, and as it comes up into the cylinder, the oil mixes with the black powder and makes a gooey slurry that we cannot ignite.
They've got one last shot. They'll strip down the engine, drain all the oil, and see if the injected powder will ignite before the engine seizes up.
There's a lot of oil in there.
And Tori thinks their chances might be better if they replace the spark plug, which fires intermittently, with this little device.
So what I did is I made this little glow plug, and all it is a little coil of wire. We're going to attach it to a battery. It'll glow red hot, and that'll be a constant source of heat to ignite the black powder every time it enters the chamber.
He's a bright spark, isn't he? Right. It's the moment of truth. Will this four-stroke engine go on gunpowder, or is it the end of the road for this myth? Gentlemen, start your engine.
Glow plug. And black powder.
Nothing. Zilch, zip, and bupkis. In desperation, they put 5 grains of gunpowder directly into the cylinder and try again.
3, 2, 1.
We got a fire.
Come on! Baby.
We did get one push. We got one charge.
We got one fire.
push.
Yeah, we got
Fired
one
once.
ignition.
Even a working engine won't work with gunpowder. And for that, we should probably all be grateful.
Do we really have to talk about this one?
No.
But we will anyway. But you can see why, over the ages, it was so tempting to use black powder. It's got such high energy density, would make a good fuel.
But the stumbling block is getting the black powder into the piston and actually igniting it.
Not to mention that these are dangerous.
So you ready to wrap this one up?
Yep.
Claim it.
Busted.
Easy. Busted.
Busted.
There we go. After the break, the Mythtanic 5 opens up on the open water. Adam and Jamie are ready to live out the ultimate boyhood dream, fitting 2 potentially explosive air cylinders to an unsuspecting ski boat, then cutting loose.
That's what it's going to be like.
It's not a fully fledged myth, but after the success of an air cylinder blasting through a wall, it's impossible to resist. Step 1 is getting our stunt skipper installed in his wetsuit without having to blur some parts of your screen. Step 2 is filling the cylinders in the boat with compressed air from the truck.
These tanks are actually filled with geese, and they're complaining.
And step 3 is seeing if Adam and Jamie can finally float their own boat.
The worst case scenario, I have to say, is that one of the tanks blows up and the shrapnel ends up ripping through Jamie's flesh and killing him.
So much for the pep talk. It's a good rule of thumb that support staff should be seen and not heard.
Jamie, so when we release you, we're going to pull off to the right-hand side and you're going to steer to our left. Okay?
You mean I'm going to steer off to port?
Yes, you're going to steer off to port, you old salt. And we'll be to the starboard. What, left and right isn't good enough when there's water around?
There's also plenty of spectators around, so they'll have to be careful.
We've got a tour over here of kids in small boats. We're going to tow you past that tour before we release you.
When all seems safe, the rocket boat is finally cut loose from the mothership. And remember, they're dealing here with twice the pressure used earlier to smash a brick wall. Jamie's ready, and the mechanical throttle is gently nudged forward in the kick-ass direction. Oh dear, lots of noise and lots of spray. But that brief burst of speed clocked in at just over 5 knots on the speed gun. And the boat was propelled a mere 120 feet.
Well, that was a whole lot of nothing.
But Adam is more upbeat.
That was excellent. I mean, it didn't do anything really important, but it was cool looking.
Okay, there's no doubt we've just seen one of the best rooster tails this side of a barnyard. But let's face facts. Jamie can probably swim faster than 5 knots. The boys have given themselves one more chance to prove the concept, and they're ready to float some ideas.
We may be able to optimize this a little bit if we choke the outlet down, and also we're going to try to drop it into the water a little lower, because I'm not sure the physics on this, but my hunch says that the air pushing more against the water instead of against just air would give us a little more oomph.
It's a bold decision that involves a lightning pit stop and a radical refit of the outlet valves. The full force of all that compressed air will now be released underwater.
Jamie is also not going to go gingerly with the throttle this time. He is just going to push it all the way forward on the first go, and just expend all of the power trying to get up to speed and stay at a speed and actually travel more than, 120 feet.
Tanks are refilled and the boat's back in position. It's now sink or swim. And Adam has some, well, vaguely helpful words of encouragement.
Remember, Jamie, experiments like this are 90% mental. I want you to be the boat. I want you to exist as one with the water. Think about the boat planing, the physics involved. Feel them in your body. Are you ready?
What?
I said just go for it.
The rocket boat is unleashed and its anchors away. Let's assume that hysterical laughter is not a good sign. In fact, the boat traveled only half the distance of its first run.
It was about the same as the other one, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't even close.
As for the speed gun, it was hardly worth installing the batteries.
Well, I think that would proverbially be that.
This lavish maritime experiment turned out to be a spectacular failure. Maybe it's time Jamie invested in a good, reliable outboard.
I don't think he even made it like 60 or 70 feet that time. I don't know if you can calculate it in miles per hour. It'd be more like miles per day.
So we have to ask ourselves, what's the wash-up?
So, Jamie, how are we going to wrap this one up? What do you call it?
Well, we did get a tank to blow through a cinder block wall when we knocked the valve off, so that's confirmed. I mean, there were documented cases as well.
And you can strap some air tanks to a boat and give it a little bit of power, but it's not that practical. It's not real power.
Yeah, we need to go for the hydrogen and light it.
It's another episode. We've got to let this one go.